Hello everyone, I wanted to make a quick video while it's still kind of fresh in my mind, I would say. The title of this video is called "The Sovereignty Movement is Bullshit," and that's sort of clickbait, but it's also sort of not. And the reason why it's fresh in my mind is because I'm reading The Sovereign's Handbook right now, which is written by Johnny Liberty. Now, I think he's a good writer. And I think that there's a lot of awesome information in his book, especially the stuff on common law, maritime law, things like that, that have to do with kind of functional knowledge for people. I think that's really great, and I think the sovereignty movement is great in that respect. Now, I want to talk about foundational components of the sovereignty movement that to me are pretty much fundamental flaws in the entire philosophy that are not compatible with America, that are not compatible with the Constitution itself, and that are not really functional or compatible with human nature and how a society in nature could function at all, which is really what I want to get into, because when you get down to the nitty-gritty of it, it sounds really nice, but I just don't see how it would be possible. And I have similar views to anarchy. I think it's anarchy adjacent, to be honest. But I have some other views about anarchy that I'll put in another video, where I just think it's fundamentally not a functional option for humanity. And the reason why I'm even talking about this is because of the integrated natural living system that I've developed. This is integrating essentially all past and present human knowledge so that we can distill out of that system a more perfect way to govern ourselves and govern other people, because all ways of governing and all ways of rights have certain pros and cons, and I'd like to look at all of them, to be honest, and I'd like to take them all for what they're worth and not idealize any of them. And there is a lot of idealizing in this book, and I've seen that as well in the anarchy communities. I've definitely had a recent discussion with a friend of mine and about anarchy, but I'll put that in a separate video. To start, like I said, there's very good information in this book, but I'll go into kind of the incompatibilities of it. So, for instance, what a sovereign is someone who has ultimate authority over themselves, right? And to me, that's incompatible with literally America and the Constitution, because as well, in the Constitution, it says there can be no sovereigns in America. And the whole point of America was to get rid of sovereigns. So I really don't understand how no one has talked about that. And maybe he does talk about it eventually. I'm only halfway through the book. This isn't a review of his book. But I get the gist of sovereignty now, and I would say it'd probably be much better to just focus on your rights that you have and the law itself. Now, sovereignty itself, I think, is a humongous deception. For one thing, we can't have people with ultimate authority over themselves, because that is essentially a king. That is literally a king. A sovereign is someone who has ultimate authority, and they exert that authority onto other people, and then they commit conquest on land that is quote-unquote not theirs, but it is God given to them, as in this respect. For instance, like Manifest Destiny, God bestows the right upon you to take other people's land. Now, I know that doesn't have to do anything with the sovereignty movement, but they seem pretty similar to each other, I would say, in that respect. So they say that here rights are God-given. Okay, so that's exactly what a king says. Now, I'm not saying that they shouldn't be God-given, but if you have ultimate authority over yourself and you are above the state, that is entirely incompatible with the Constitution. The whole reason for America is that we did not have people who were above the law and function only through God's will, which is what kings and kingdoms are. That's what monarchies are. So, to me, the sovereignty movement imagines that there is some way for everyone to become king and queen somehow of their own, I guess, domain, in a sense, even though that's what the Constitution already does for citizens. It allows us to get land without conquest through economic means, and then also ensures us a certain amount of rights, right, to those lands, and we become landlords over that land, like a lord would, and you don't need to have any particular status in royal circles or anything like that. So to me, it's like saying everyone can be a king or a queen. That's what it really boils down to me. And as well, it seems like there's just a lot of the sovereignty movement really not wanting to accept the responsibilities of society. Because the society they're talking about, it seems like they just want to make a breakaway society that's similar to anarchy, where somehow people govern themselves without a third party. And that's what I'll get into the whole anarchy movement, because that is essentially what the sovereignty movement is going towards as well. And there's a whole reason why people should not be above the law. For one thing, it means that there are no consequences for their actions, right? And if people have ultimate authority over themselves, how will you assert justice on other people? There can be no justice in a sovereign system. There can be, in the same way, there can be no real justice in an anarchical system. Now, in a monarchical system, it's probably the same. But for this, it seems like how would you have justice in that sense? You know, I've seen sovereigns go to like a court judge and start talking about how they're above the court and above the law. And I know you have rights that are given to you, but they do not give you the right above all people. That is ridiculous, and you are not above the law. What I kind of am feeling from the sovereignty movement and the anarchy movement is they just don't want to be told what to do, essentially. They don't want to listen to laws. They don't want to do all these things. And I know there's a civic duty to disobey unjust laws, and I think that's a part of it, but you also have to know that there's consequences for those actions if you do disobey the law. So for me, the sovereignty movement, I would say, is kind of full of shit. Now, if you want to call it the kind of know your rights movement and kind of gains some amount of sovereignty in the sense of independence. Now, if you want to talk about independence, right, and kind of, you know, food sovereignty and getting economic sovereignty and all those different things, that's fine, I would say. But individual sovereignty, I'm not sure how that would be possible. Because the reason why, and they hate on this system of citizenship and all these different things. Well, a citizen, right, is a person within a society. You know, how do you have a society of sovereigns? I just don't see how that's really possible, because, again, it would just be a bunch of people who don't really have to listen to anybody. And how are you going to get things done in that system? Especially because a lot of the time you have to do things that people don't want you to do in order to get justice or in order to push the society along. And it's the same with anarchy. it's like they don't want to call it what it is, what it really is. And what it really is to me is they don't want to be told what to do, and they want to kind of just do their own thing in this breakaway civilization. And I don't mind, because the elites are making their own little breakaway civilization. They're making their agenda 2030, and I think we should make our agenda 2030. But we need to be sure about what that entails. And it seems like they want to give up citizenship, right, and kind of make their own nation. Now, I've seen this in the sovereignty movement as well, and I actually knew someone who did something like this and made their own nation. And it's like, okay, so are you going to be a domestic nation? Are you going to be a peaceful nation? Because essentially what they are doing is what the people who made conquest in America did. Is the Europeans came over here and they wrote down on a piece of paper that they were coming here because God said it was good, and that they're going to take the land. And if you write a Declaration of Independence, it is just as legitimate. There's no legitimacy problem. You're doing the exact same thing that the people who took the land here did. But what they're not understanding is okay, so you're quote unquote a nation, you're quote unquote a sovereign, you're quote unquote separate from the United States. Now what are you going to do? Do you have natural resources? Do you have land? Do you have a plan on doing that? Do you have a military? Do you have a way of protecting your people or protecting yourself? Are you going to just say the United States sucks and then use them as support for your nation, or use them as protection because now you're inside of their nation? And I mean, then you would just be a domestic nation similar to indigenous nations. Okay. That's interesting, I would say, but it doesn't seem like a lot of that is thought out. What I do see is a lot of people not thinking about those things. What I see is a lot of people being fanciful and saying, oh, I'm going to go create my own nation, which sounds cool, which sounds fun. Oh, I'm going to be a sovereign. I'm a sovereign now. I decide what I do. I'm above the law. I'm above all these different things. Okay, interesting, but okay, how are you above the law, and what exactly does that make you? And how is a sovereign different from the sovereigns of the past, which were kings and queens? And who gets to decide what land you get? That's another thing I'll go into in anarchy is who decides what land you get? Are you going to commit conquest for it? I mean, again, in what world do they perceive? Is it just sovereigns like claiming stuff and allowing other sovereigns other things? I don't understand actually how the society would work. Because, for instance, if I want land over here, who gets to decide that I get that land and it is mine besides the government? Besides a third-party establishment that at least is somewhat neutral and at least is a bureaucracy of some kind. And that's what they go into, the bureaucracy of the United States and all this stuff. And it's like, well, I'll tell you, that's why I'm specifically not anti-government. I mean, I know for a fact there is a shadow government within our government, for sure, that's pulling the strings in a lot of ways. But that cannot be used to take away from the fact that government is good. Because, for instance, if you don't like bureaucracies in government, okay, next time you get someone to sign a contract for you, right, and you take it to a notary and have that signed, right, and then they end up saying, oh no, I actually don't owe you that money, or actually I don't have to do this. Who's going to make them do it? Besides the government, besides courts. That's what the justice system is. literally. That is what the government is. It is just a third party because it ensures, right, security, at least to some degree. Now, without government, what you would either have to do is you'd have to allow them to not fulfill their contract and just take a loss. You would have to take the money that is owed from you, right? It wouldn't be stealing, but you'd have to forcefully take it, which is what the government does for you, by the way, right? So if you're under contract and you sue, let's say you sue someone or something like that, that's what the government does for you, and they have the police and all these different collection agencies and things to do that for you. But see, in the past, with no government or less government, you'd have to do that kind of stuff. So you would have to take it from them, right? And if they didn't want to give it to you when you tried to take it from them, guess what? You'd have to kill them. You'd have to kill them and take it. That's just the reality of the situation, and that's the reality of anarchy as well. And I'll go into anarchy, like I said, in another video. But this is what I'm talking about is they kind of hate on these bureaucracies, these governments, because of these New World Order people, which, I know exist for a fact. Just go watch any Alex Jones documentary, or, go look up the Freemasons or any of those people. There's definitely groups that are pulling the strings behind the strings behind the screen, okay? But what this is very, to me, it's actually, it seems like it's this thing about freedom and power and all this stuff, but it disguises itself as something innocent, when in fact it's pretty dangerous and nefarious. And I now know why the government doesn't like the sovereignty movement, because it's probably incompatible with society in any shape or form. I'm all for people's rights. I'm totally for people's rights. I actually am going to read the whole series of books because I think there's a lot of information in here that's really good about law, specifically about sovereignty law, about indigenous law, about, individual rights, about the Constitution, about a lot of things that I think are really good, or just about the state law, about maritime law, which is what the courts are under. I think that's all very interesting and good. I think informing yourself is a good thing. But I don't think this whole idea of sovereignty is a good thing unless we're going to have a completely different society. Because in the United States, we already function with a pretty high level of freedom, at least on our own land. There are things I would say that because of the third-party organizations and the government, we don't have. Like, for instance, in agriculture, there's a lot of restrictions on a lot of things as well. But I'll tell you this. Yes, I know that there's a lot of restrictions and a lot of things going on, and people will say, oh, that, you're stupid. You have no clue about that. Okay. But, okay, you want less restrictions? Okay, that's great. And you're going to have more people messing things up. And you're going to have more problems. And this is why these things are in place. Now, I'm okay with less restrictions, but I know what the consequence of that is. You're going to have more environmental destruction. You're going to have more people just building whatever the hell they want and, probably destroying the environment more. And probably it's probably not going to be good for people's health. And there's all these different things. Yes, a bureaucracy exists. Yes, a government exists. But at least it does exist. Because if it did not, that would be terrible. In a certain sense, it would be pretty terrible, and it would be a different world. It'd be a world of vigilantism and voluntarism and all these different things, which to me are a nightmare compared to what we have now. Which is at least it's not the greatest thing ever, but I think it's at least something, because nothing I don't think anyone is prepared for. But the only reason why I went into this topic, while it's fresh on my mind, is because, to me, and the company that I'm starting, New Eden, uh, at first I was like, "Oh, this is such a cool idea." I mean, imagine a nation of New Eden. Imagine this becoming something where I get tons of land and I essentially have my own nation. I mean, how incredible does that sound? And you have all this sovereignty stuff in there, and that's really interesting. But we can't forget the things of the past that work, and that all the things we have now are for specific reasons of the past, which is why there is government now and why there used to not be government, because of good reasons. Now, I'm okay with exploring all the reasons of why people don't think there should be government, or why you should have these kind of sovereignty, this type of sovereignty, or not. But I don't think it really has a place, to be honest. I think it has a place to be integrated. So all the good things to be integrated into a kind of new system for governance, self-governance, and just governance of others in nature, because I think it would look very different in nature. And that's kind of that's where my research is going, because this is what I'm researching right now currently. And that's where my research is going in terms of governance and as well economy. I think there's some interesting stuff in here about decentralized economy, so I'm definitely going to look into that. But yeah, that's kind of the gist of the video. I'm definitely going to continue my my introduction to integrated natural living videos series. So stay tuned for that. Like, subscribe, and follow us on Instagram. I'll have everything in the video notes. And I'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.